This is just a continuation of finding integrals that includes more negative numbers and fractions. If I were integrating this function, I'm going to start with the first term and add 1 on to my exponent of 5. And then next I need to take 3/2 divided by 6. So I'm just going to do that off to the side. 3/2 divided by 6 is the same thing as 3/2 times its reciprocal. And I'm just going to reduce those. So I end up getting 1/4. So my new coefficient for my first term should be 1/4. My next term, I originally have a -5 for my exponent. I need to add 1, so that becomes -4. And then I take my coefficient out front, which is 1, divided by -4, and that's a -4. My third exponent is a fraction. So when I add 1 on, I need a common denominator, so I'm going to add on 5/5. That means my new exponent will be 7/5. Next, to get my coefficient, I originally had a -1/3 as a coefficient. I need to divide that by 7/5, so that, that's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. My new exponent should be -5/21. My fourth term, also a fraction, so I'm going to add 2/2. My new exponent will be a +1/2. And when I take the coefficient of 1 divided by 1/2, so 1 divided by 1/2 is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal, which is 2/1. So I end up getting a +2 for my coefficient. And my last term would be 4x. And then once again, I do need to include that constant, so I'm going to put a +c. In my next example, I need to rewrite a few of these terms. My first term's okay to integrate. My next term, I'm going to eliminate the square root and change that to x to the 1/2 power. In my third term, a cube root would be an exponent of 1/3, but I don't want to have my x in the denominator, so I'm going to move my x to the top, and that will change that exponent to be a negative. So that would be a -1/3. And my last term's okay to have. So these are the 4 terms I want to integrate. So I'm going to add 1 on to that -4. My coefficient would be 3 divided by -3, which is -1. My next term, I need to add 2/2. And then I'm going to take that 6. When I divide it by 3/2, that's the same as multiplying by 2/3. So that becomes 4. Third term, I would add 3/3 to my exponent. My coefficient would be a -1 divided by 2/3, or the same thing as multiplying by 3/2. So I have a -3/2 coefficient. Fourth term would be 2x, and then followed by +c. Okay, this is the final example. I want to rewrite this to start with. What I am going to do is separate this into 3 terms. So I'm going to take each of these divided by the 2x and simplify. So if I have x to the 4th over 2x, my x's would reduce. My coefficient is actually a 1/2. So I'm going to rewrite this as 1/2 x cubed. my middle term, my x's would reduce, so I would have an x squared. My coefficient, I'm going to view that as being 7/2. And for my last term, my coefficient would be the 8/2, which reduces, so actually I have -4 and then x after I reduce my x's. Now that I have it rewritten, I can just go ahead and integrate.